Well, thank you for joining me. Appreciate you going to our website, gameplanforlife.com. I kind of want to share a little something personal. Lots of times when I share with you something from an inspirational standpoint, I'm normally talking to myself. And so, but I wanted to share this with you. About 6 weeks ago, I happened to be sitting in my office and I got a phone call. And basically what the phone call was telling me, there was a situation that had developed. And I could tell at that very moment that this was going to be a real time of trial in my life. Maybe some of you are kind of facing something similar to that. Or you may be in the middle of a trial. And certainly at some point in our life, you're going to see things show up, and at that moment you're going to know, hey, this is going to be a tough situation for me to go through. And that's what happened to me. As soon as I saw this, I said, this is not going to be something that goes away in a short period of time. This is going to be something that's going to be a severe trial. And I immediately started praying. And maybe some of you are experiencing something similar to this. In this particular case, it had to do with our race team. When you stop and think about this, our race team is something we started 21 years ago. It's family owned, and we now have 430 people working here. It's a huge responsibility, and many times a lot of us, whether it's JD, myself, Coy, Pat, our family, lots of times what we think about is all the people here that count on us. And so there's a lot of sponsors here. And there's a lot involved when you get that many people in a family business. And so this situation developed, and I want to kind of share with you what happened in my life over this period of time. The first thing that happened, obviously, I turned to my daily Bible study. And as I picked up the study on where I was, it's kind of amazing the way God works through this book. He left us a game plan for life. And he also knows every single thing that's in our life. He knew in this particular situation what? That I was going to be going through a trial. And so my study happened to be where I was is the first chapter in James. And as I turned to that, it was kind of amazing to me because it was obvious that God was taking me on a journey through His Word and how I should deal with this particular trial in my life. It was a big deal. All right, now having said that, as I started this study, and it's really in that first chapter, and it's really the first 12 to 13 verses, and he took me on a little study, and that study, I felt like, has helped prepare me and help me walk through this particular tough time in my life. I even made a little study sheet on it, and I kind of carry it with me now because I know this isn't going to be the only trial that I'm going to be facing at some point in my life. So let me kind of share with you some encouragement that I got. The very first thing that shows up in the first chapter of James is something that's kind of wild. What it says is this: count it all joy when you're going through a trial. Now that I got to tell you, that's a tough one. And really, kind of let me read just the very first verse here. James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings, okay, from James. And then it says in verse 2, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations. So basically what the very first thing on my little cheat sheet says this: count it all joy. How are you going to be joyful? I mean, I'm looking at this thing going, oh my gosh, I'm going to be going through the biggest mess. But really, when you stop and think about it, if we know, yes, many of these things are too big for us, but nothing's too big for God. And so really what he's saying to us, be joyful. Okay, so that's the first thing that jumped out at me. Okay, the second thing is that God doesn't put us through troubles for trouble's sake. There is always going to be a purpose when he puts us through something tough. In other words, it's not just going to be a test or a time of trial for trial's sake. It's going to be the fact that we're going to be going through something, but there's going to be a purpose in it. And so if we basically the way J. Vernon describes it is this. James goes on to make it clear that God does not give us trouble for trouble's sake. Not an end in itself. In other words, there is going to be a reason that we're going through this trial. So that's the second point that I discovered in this little study. The third point takes us on to the third verse in James. And basically, this is what it says. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Now that for me is a big deal. I'm not patient. I have a tendency when I see something like this, I want to dive into it. I am not at peace with myself until I get this thing worked out. And it's hard for me to have a patience when I'm going through things. I don't know about you guys, but that really spoke to me. Okay, the fourth thing, if you lack wisdom, then ask God. Many times I have a tendency to barrel off into something, but the point is, God has said that we can have wisdom if we ask Him. And so that comes up in verse 5 in the first chapter of James. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. In other words, it's a promise that we can ask for wisdom, and we're going to get wisdom. Number 5, do not waver. Once you've made a decision, and this is a tough one for me many times, but God says once you've made a decision, you've prayed to Him, asked for guidance, leadership, and direction, and made that decision, don't waver back and forth. That comes up in verse 6. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. In other words, don't be double-minded. When we ask Him, chart our course, make our decision, and don't waver. Okay, the next little key point here, and this is really a good one for me. Okay, and J. Vernon has a great way of putting this. Okay, and basically the statement by J. Vernon is this. If you're going to work it out, in other words, if you're going to work it out, okay, then you don't need God to work it out. And he makes he paints a little picture here. He said, many times we act like a bull in a china closet. Now, if that doesn't speak to me, that speaks to me. In other words, I go charging off into something that's like a bull in a china closet. I am destroying stuff, knocking stuff down. I'm all over the place because I don't have that patience and I'm hard after it. So I think the point is, now, if you're asking God, God help me work this out, then we should what? Have faith knowing that He's going to help us. And you don't go charging off into the china closet, being a bull and knocking everything down. You're going to trust Him. Okay, the next little point that's made on my cheat sheet, trials don't mean God doesn't love us. Matter of fact, the reason why we should be joyful when we see a trial flare up is what? It means God's working in our life. And that is something we can be joyful about. In other words, if my life just rolling along, there's nothing happening, I'm just kind of cruising in cruise control, okay? God says, hey, look, no, there's things I need to be working in your life, and these trials are going to help you advance in your life. And that's exciting, knowing that God's involved with us. We see trials, it means, hey, I'm working, God's working in our life. So that's exciting for us. Number 6 here is the point that I got on my little sheet. And it said, blessed is the man that endureth temptation. Okay, verse 12. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation. For when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love Him. And so I think this is a great one. We can say, hey, look, once we've endured the temptation, gone through the trial, okay, then we're going to be blessed by this. Okay, number 7. Testing in our life will either drive us to God, is the point that J. Vernon is making, or it's going to drive us away from God. Okay, so what's it going to be? What's it going to be for you and I? Is it going to cause me to say, God, hey, question Him? Why am I going through this? Or is it going to drive me closer to Him? And I think that's a key point. I want to go closer to God. I know if He's in my life, I've got trials, I've got temptations. I want to be going towards God and seeking His guidance, leadership, and direction. And then the very last point that he makes, okay, in this first chapter of James, and it's a key point for all of us, trouble doesn't come to stay. Isn't that great? In my life, I've gone through a lot of trouble, a lot of trials, a lot of temptations. But here's the great thing. Over a period of time, trouble doesn't stay. If I'm on God's team, seeking His guidance and leadership and direction when I'm going through trials, then I know at some point I'm going to have peace and this is going to be resolved. Isn't that great, that little cheat sheet? I'm just going to direct you. And maybe some of you out there, it could be a personal situation that you're dealing with it yourself. It could be a occupational situation with your work. It could be in a relationship. It could be addiction. Whatever it is, whatever your trial is, I just encourage you. Okay, and this encouraged me. That first chapter in James can be a big chapter for you. I ask you to go to gameplanforlife.com. We have a free gift there for you. We'd love to send you a little New Testament study Bible that we send out free. And we'd also like for you to come to the website to see the other things that we have on our website that might encourage you. I appreciate you joining me for this little time. I hope it meant something to you. Thank you.